Where are you?
fish taverns. Would that be the place that sells or serves the head of what was it? What was it that you showed me, Darkfire? It was like a head of
No,
a
that was the
lamb.
hell of a that was the head
Was
of a
that somewhere
lamb.
else? Head of a lamb. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No.
My dad used to tell me about that as well. They used to have that when in the village when he was younger, but I've never had it myself. But
Never had a lamb head.
no, not with the eyes and the brain and everything.
Oh,
No,
you're missing out.
yeah, yeah.
I don't send pictures to everyone because a lot of people don't like it. But yeah, it's.
Oh, is that a regular in your house? Is that?
Yeah. Like a week ago, I went to like a tavern and we had it. You can tell a tavern is good if it has like a Dark Souls name.
Okay.
Cyber's like Porphyrius or something like that.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind next time.
Imagining Darkfire just sending pictures of lamb heads to people, sort of unprovoked.
No, I
Hey,
ask
there's a
them.
lamb
I ask them before I send them. Even in the Discord where I sent it, I was like, there aren't any vegans here, are there? And, like sensitive souls.
Yeah.
And put like a content warning over it, as a,
Yeah.
of a lamb head just staring you in the face. Anyway, Cyprus is a very normal place. Hello
Yeah.
and welcome to Video Gems, the podcast where we bring people and suck their brains for the delicious knowledge juice within not just lambs. If I sound more excited than I usually am, it's because I am. I am your host, Darkfry the Hedgehog, joined by my wonderful co-host, Harry, from Video Games Are Bad. Aronok, sadly, is not joining us once again this time. She is with us in spirit, as she is omnipresent, like the eldritch being she is. With us this time, we have the wonderful, the handsome, the talented Gregorios Kythreotis, and yes, that is how you pronounce it. Gregorios, introduce yourself.
Hi. Yeah, I'm just gonna let you pronounce it because you're better than me at pronouncing my own name. But yeah, thank you for having me on. Looking forward to chatting about whatever you want to know. I'm kind of curious. I have no idea what I've got myself into, set myself up for, but yeah, look forward to it.
Awesome. So, Gregorios, you can tell he has a Greek name because if you say it in an English way, it sounds like a Dark Souls boss. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's
Used
why
to get that, or Spartan Warrior when I was younger, but also just people just fantastically brutalizing it in ways that you just can't even imagine. But yeah, I've kind of enjoyed having a name like Gregorius, but it's actually my granddad's name, and I've inherited it. But
I don't know. Is that a thing in other cultures, like inheriting the name of your dad or granddad?
I think so, but maybe less regimented. I feel like it's really regimented, at least in my family. Like my dad is named after his granddad, and it's very like
Yeah. In Cyprus and Greece, it's a big thing, but I don't know if it's a thing like everywhere else. So like
yeah. I remember
Gregorios, I can imagine like the Boss Health bar, or like beneath your name, right?
That's what it's like working for me. No, not really. I'm a nice boss. But no, I remember a few years ago, because it's quite an unusual name, even as a Greek name. Like Kythreotis is like quite Cypriot, I think.
Yep.
Because it's like referencing a specific region, and my granddad must have been near the Cypriot embassy in South London at some point, and he dropped his ID card, and then I just out of the blue got a Facebook message from someone being like, "Do you know this man?" And it was just a photo of his ID card. I was like, "Yeah, that's my that's my granddad." So I had them send it to someone I knew, and then I could get it. But I think it's quite an unusual name in that regard.
Yeah, Kythreotis is like straight. I knew you were Cypriot, like part Cypriot at least, like
Yeah.
from the name, is it's why, and it's part of the reason why I approached you, because like being Cypriot myself, I wanted to like meet more devs that have at least like hailed from Cyprus or have some sort of root here. Just wanted to meet more people. So, just tell us, what is it you do exactly?
So I'm a game developer. I guess I call myself creative director on Sable, but now I just feel like I'm just someone who makes games at the moment. My role just kind of changes depending on what needs to be done on a project. But I co-run a studio called Chedworks, and we released it. We didn't just release, actually. We released a video game called Sable almost 2 years ago now. God, it's been a long time. On Xbox and PC, and then a year ago, just under a year ago now, on PS5. It was a open world desert exploration game, sci-fi, kind of rendered in a like clear line, cell shaded style, with a soundtrack by Japanese Breakfast, which was it was really cool. I'm pretty proud of what we made and what we released, and now we're just doing a design works actually, which should be off for printing soon, I hope. I think the files are like very close to done now, and that would be really cool. So keep an eye out for that. I think it's something we worked really hard on. But,
it's really cool that you did the whole work of. From what I understand, you're like documenting a big part of the process of creating Sable, right? In those.
Yeah. It was a lot of it's like sketches. So I have a bunch of sketchbooks just that I used to write and draw in, and then a big part of it are like sketches from digital sketches, that draw overs, stuff like that I would send to people or use for my own reference. So I'd send it to like Shanaz or Yanis or Micah, who were like most of the art team on Sable outside of myself. And so actually I had quite a lot of just documentation naturally from the process of making the game. Organizing that wasn't simple. It took a lot of time. And then a bunch of stuff that we've included is also like in-game screenshots, like almost archive photography of assets in the game, locations, just trying to kind of almost catalog a huge part of the game. And I don't really know why. I think it's the sort of thing that I really like. Like, I had it over my shoulder here, actually, the Gravity Rush, like
Ooh,
art book
brilliant.
design. Yeah, it's really
Rush,
cool.
great.
Yeah, and I really like that sort of. I think it's more common in like Japanese animation, actually. That like term design works, I think, comes from that. So yeah, it's the sort of thing that I read and buy and spend a lot of time looking at. So I just wanted to like make something that was kind of following that lineage, I guess. So yeah, it's been cool. It's been taken a lot longer than I thought, but we really wanted to get it right, including the like actual physical object of the book. Like I don't like hardbacks, so I kind of forced Lost in Cult to do it only softback, but like a really floppy softback. Like I was like, okay, it has to have the right flop. It has to flop well. Yeah, that's been a like. So we got.
If this thing doesn't flop like a fish out of water on my desk, I don't want any of it.
Pretty much. That's that. Yeah, we got the sample, and I wasn't happy. We had to send it back.
Wasn't happy with the flop.
No. The flop wasn't right.
Test.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, spent an inordinate amount of time analyzing the floppage of this book. But yeah, hopefully the next sample, we've made some small tweaks. It's very technical, but yeah, we're getting there. It's almost done. So that's exciting. That is exciting.
That's very exciting. Any sort of like documentation or archiving of the process, or sketches, early drafts, just anything like that. I'm a total sucker for. I absolutely adore it. I want to see the process and the behind the scenes. I want to see it. More devs should be open about it. I think more like more devs do should make this sort of stuff available. Like the Double Fine Psych Odyssey is like one of the best things ever, pretty much, and more more people should do it and just be have that sort of stuff open source once the as much as the dev can provide once the game is out, because
I know I'm awaiting mine in the mail.
Oh yeah.
One
sorry,
excited.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Sorry to keep you waiting, but yeah.
Yeah. So game dev is already such a secretive industry, notoriously, right? So any morsel of information you can get is valuable.
Yeah, it's tough. The thing is, I probably felt somewhat similarly to that, in that oh yeah, it should be something. But now, having gone through the process, it's it takes a lot of time, and it's not we're not going to make a lot of money from impact. In fact, probably for my time, we will lose money on this project. Yeah. But seeing that the Psych Odyssey was an incredible documentary, incredible achievement, but also incredibly brave, and takes a lot of foresight. You have to, I don't know who was paying for that to be made over 6 years. That's not cheap. That's not free.
Definitely.
And then editing that down must have been incredible. And then just putting it up free on YouTube or whatever, mad. But I think it's just it's really brave, because when things go wrong, and like they do in that documentary, it's really easy for that to get a very ungenerous amount of blowback for that sort of thing. I think the way people interpret these things, especially the way they can be cut and edited, can be quite ungenerous, especially when you look back on something with the benefit of hindsight. But I really think that documentary is so well done, and I do think they came out of it looking really good. But yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, who knows? That might have never been released, because when Microsoft bought Double Fine, they easily could have turned around and said, no, we don't want you to release that. So it's tricky, it's complicated. And I think as a developer, you have to really care about sharing that stuff, because ultimately you're always filtering it as well. There are bits of making Sable that won't make it in this book for various reasons, because you might not be able to talk about stuff like certain contractual elements. 2, you might not want to reveal certain information for whatever reason. Maybe something happened during development, and you might not want to expose that, for not just for your own sake, but for other people who are involved, because it's not just yourself. You have a obligation to people that you work with, to people that you employ. I think that is one of the tricky balances. So when you just make it about the work, that is one half of it, but the other half of it, of course, is just the human aspect, the working with people aspect, and that's something that's very hard to capture with a book. We try to capture a bit of it through interviews and through some. We have some interviews with collaborators, but you also just have a limited page count, and yeah, we're not sure exactly why certain people are buying this book and other people, you're trying to. Some people keep calling it an art book, for example, and I'm worried constantly are these people going to be disappointed, because it's not really we don't produce that much cleaned up concept art during production. Most of the cleaned up concept art is just stuff, key art that you would show the public, and marketing materials. And we probably used all of that, because it takes ages to make, and as a small indie, you don't have time to tidy up all these drawings. In fact, a lot of the drawings will be quite rough, but I was really keen to show that side of production, that side of development, show that it's not all very pretty, even in a game that I think we were kind of people appreciate the art style for what we were doing, but it's not always a pretty production process. Sometimes it can be ugly, and I think for me I find that really exciting. I like seeing that sort of the really scratchy sketches, but I find it really hard to do that myself, luckily, I'm not employed as an artist. I'm not employed at all. I'm self-employed. Like I'm unemployable basically at this point. I've made myself unemployable. But I think if you're someone who, say you are a professional artist and you expose yourself in that way, you worry that people are going to judge you professionally, because you grow. I spent 5 years making Sable. I'm a better artist now than I was when I started. Is that progression something I want to show, expose to people? I don't know. It's complicated, but I did write a bit of an intro in the book about kind of what you were saying about game development feeling like a bit of a black box, and I think it definitely can do. And I think you see occasionally a documentary here and there which gives you a little bit of insight, but it might be a bit like Indie Gamer Movie, which is super like almost that kind of survivorship bias, like airplane image of indie game development, but also quite like Hollywood almost. I would say though that was a really important documentary for me, having the hubris, the arrogance to deign to think I could be an indie developer. And I would say I got lucky, very lucky, to actually eventually turn this into a self-sustaining job. But and then you see stuff like Sony did the God of War one a few years back, which was quite popular. But again, it's like 1 hour following one guy on this project, which had thousands of people working on it, right? Thousands of people working on it, released by a big corporation who have their own image to project and that they want to show people. So there's always different kind of motivations, always different sort of intentions with these things. So you have to read that as a viewer, I guess. But I hope people get something from it. I think one of the best video game production books I ever read was the Spelunky one, the boss fight Spelunky one, written by Derek Hugh.
Ooh, I haven't seen that one. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I don't even have a copy here because I give it to students as soon as they come. I just give it here, read this, and I'm lucky if I get it back. I need to get a new one. But it's available digitally as well, and I think that was an incredible book.
I love that you said that the thought of wanting to become an indie developer takes a lot of arrogance and hubris, because it really feels that way. It really feels that way. The Dunning-Kruger graph, like the whole how confident you are and how much you know about something. With game dev, it really feels at its strongest, because you start off thinking that you can grab God by the balls, right? You think that you can just make anything and everything is going to go great. But then you learn more and more, and then you start thinking, how the hell does any video game get finished?
Yeah, I'm curious about this actually. So, how long is it? Was it 5 years since the start of Sable's development, or it took 5 years? Is that correct?
Yeah, so we started the concepting in 2016, like April, and then we started actually working on it in 2017. So when that was 6 years ago now. So yeah.
I think one thing that stood out to me about Sable is sort of when you look at the credits, just how many sort of newcomers there are to game dev, it seems.
Yeah.
So, do you think that kind of affected development at all? Do you think there were certain mindsets that maybe helped you potentially?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, you're learning, definitely. I mean, it is a funny thing. I have been thinking about this. Like, we definitely hired people who either it was their first job or one of the first jobs that they had in games, or really early on in their career, and that was really cool because you get to bring people on who maybe come from a slightly different
That's
background.
So rare.
But it does put a big burden on you, especially as someone who is relatively inexperienced, to try and guide someone through a project as well. And I think, yeah, I'm pretty proud of it. It's exciting to bring new people into the industry, but it is really nice to work with people who are really experienced as well, like Martin, the sound designer. He was an incredible asset on the project, not just as a sound designer, but also just as a person on the team who you could go and talk to and say, like, you've worked on 20 different projects. What do you think of this situation that we're coming up? So it's definitely a double-edged sword. So I think like that was an example where we tried to pair someone like Michelle, who Japanese Breakfast, who had never worked on a game before, with someone who had worked on a lot of games, and that was a really nice combination because there was someone bringing something fresh, but also someone who had a lot of experience dealing with problems that we might come up against. It was interesting. It was good fun. I think now I'm a bit more experienced, like kind of tying it back to the idea of hubris, right? Like now it's actually starting new projects and stuff. You start to realize like maybe it's useful to be a bit stupid. It's useful to have a bit of ignorance. Like you make, because you don't even know what your problems you're causing yourself down the line, and when you know what problems you're causing yourself down the line, you just hesitate that much more, and you're just like, you're trying to design the perfect thing to avoid, and sometimes you just have to learn to let go and switch that, like it's like a danger avoidance part of your brain off a little bit, but then
Sorry, go on.
Then maybe the flip side of that is in the long run you do avoid a lot of the headaches and problems that we ended up running up against.
Right, yeah, 'cause like say, I don't know, let's say Sable gets sucked into a black hole one day and you have to do it all over again with all of your knowledge. I guess would be the case that like, certain things would probably go better, but potentially certain things that you know about that are going to be problems, you probably be a bit more apprehensive towards.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
I definitely think so. I think it's really hard to like, you also don't, when you've done it, you kind of forget about the little bits, the like loads of hundreds and hundreds of little things that you did to get to somewhere. It's interesting. I have thought a lot about it because I'm now so aware that like, am I choosing not to design this thing because I'm trying to be too clever, or am I like, and you can kind of see how people start making quite safe things, which there are benefits and detriments to that sort of process. Like you can see why genre is such a useful framework to interrogate a project, and I think that was something, or like the way people did. I think one thing we didn't come from traditional game design backgrounds ourselves, so like one thing I think we just designed a game that we thought would be cool, but it was a very like instinctive kind of process in a way. And I think if we had trained in a more traditional game design, if we'd done game design degrees, say, maybe we would have been like thinking more about like game loops and about like meta structures, and like these more formal elements. And maybe Sable wouldn't have ended up being what it was, but maybe it would have been a more popular video game.
Sable would have been a roguelike.
Yeah.
Roguelike deck builder.
Yeah. Well, I think at some point we were like, oh, maybe it's a minimalist like survival type game really early on. But I guess we scrapped that for whatever reason. I think as much because we didn't know if we could do that well, and we were just kind of like, if we can't do it well, let's not do it.
So, like, this is one of the reasons that, like, getting into indie game development right now is like so daunting and terrifying, right? Because if you're interested in it and you're an aspiring game developer or whatever, like you see all of these processes that have to go in, like it's you see that it's really hard and there's so much work put into it and so much to think about, and the publishing and marketing and the development itself and managing the team and finding the team and blah 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 blah. So it's it's good that you say it, that you need to be a bit ignorant to go into it, because then you can just do it. Because ultimately the way that you do get into games development, despite all these apprehensions, like the advice that everyone's going to give you, and it sounds like a cop out, but it's really what you have to do, is you have to just do it. You have to just jump into the sharks.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's good on one level because it's maybe more realistic, that the expectation is there financially, that this isn't something that you can necessarily rely on if you don't know if you haven't got a publisher or you haven't got a deal ahead of time or whatever, like a first party publishing deal or some sort of guarantee financially that you're going to make your money back, which I think is a good thing, because I think if you're someone who thinks there's an off chance that you might make loads of money and so you invest your life savings into making this game or that you want to make or whatever, and it puts you off, that's probably good. If it's putting you off because you're afraid of the problems you might face working on it for fun, or because you want to, or because that's what you want to learn how to do, I think that's bad, and you need to I don't want to put people off making games. When we talk about that sort of stuff, it's not about it's not about putting people off. It's just about being realistic about the economic circumstances of game production. But I also think when you were saying like, hiring all these people, you can just make games on your own, and there are so incredible resources now, game engines, free software that it's really good. It's really good.
Yeah,
and I think if
it doesn't have to be like on that big a scale, but like that's how a lot of people imagine it.
Yeah. I think you have to get excited about making smaller stuff and one of my good friends, Gareth Damien Martin, made a game called In Other Waters as their first game, and then Citizen Sleeper. And part of the those games are incredibly well written. But one of the things that I admire most about Gareth is how organized and good at scoping they are in terms of their projects. Just like hyper focused, like nobody better that I've met. And part of that is because Gareth worked in theatre, I think, before working in games. And so as they say in theatre, once you have a deadline, like you cannot miss it. You don't miss it, you don't push it back, you hit it. So you just make the decisions to get you there. And I think it's a really admirable, interesting way to make games. But I think it also, process is the most important part in any creative medium. It leads to outcome, right? So the kind of game you want to make is all about the process. So that process, being hyper organized, getting things lined up, leads to a type of game. And but then there are other kinds of games where you have a much looser process, and it's much more you're finding the fun for a lot of the time, and there's a lot of unknowns. And I think if you're making that kind of game, it's really hard to then organize your time in a way that is extremely structured. So I don't know what my point is there, but
Which
it's
one
harder.
do you think Sable falls into?
Well, no, Sable's a different category of just like we just went a bit overboard on the scale and couldn't back down. I mean, to be fair, I think there's a version of Sable which is a lot smaller that we thought we were going to make, and then we secured a Game Pass deal, and that just raised our budget significantly, and we were just like, okay, that means we can work on this game longer, we can have a slightly bigger team, and that was really an opportunity that we wanted to make the most of, and because we had a lot more people looking at our game than we thought we ever would. We thought it'd be a much smaller project. So in that sense, Sable grew because during development. And part of that is because when we signed with our publisher, Raw Fury, they kind of signed us on the back of our social media popularity. So we had posted a couple of GIFs and it really hit on Twitter. And they were really young publisher. We were very new developers. We didn't even have like we didn't know what we were looking for. We didn't have a pitch deck ready, but we met the scout Callum Underwood, after he saw our GIFs on Twitter. And we showed him the game and he said, fly out to Stockholm, meet the rest of the team. And even whilst we were in Stockholm, they were just like, well, how much money do you want? And we were like, we don't know. We haven't finished that yet. And so they said to us, like, let us help you work out what you need to make this game. We'll put a number in. It'll be pretty rough. And if we secure a deal, then we'll raise the number. And they did. And they were true to their word. They took a risk on us. I don't think that's very common, but it was quite a cool way to...
Yeah, that definitely seemed like a very like outlier case. But
yeah.
But it's great. It's great that it happened and it worked out, and the results speak for themselves. And man, just hearing you say that, it's such a shame what just the state of Twitter now, because it's such a valuable asset for for indie devs, and it's just going to shit. Sad.
Yeah, I'm very sad not for myself, because I feel like I'm okay now. I'm fine. Like I have the connections and the visibility that I hopefully need to carry my career on. But I feel bad for me of 6 years ago, who would have been on Twitter trying, sharing.
Well, yeah, and trying to build a following there, like trying to build a following there and now it's just it's all crumbling down.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a career without that stuff. It wasn't just Twitter; it was also Tumblr and other forms. But Twitter was the main one, and Twitter is a place where most developers are, or most of the industry is, was at the moment. I feel like it's hard to know what's going to happen. If it all collapses, who knows? Maybe everyone will be on Blue Sky or whatever, or Threads or Substack. I don't know. It's impossible to know. It feels really, even for me, I'm just like, I'm kind of just waiting to see where it resolves itself. But it was quite an interesting time for sure. That period, I think it's quite funny because, I think there's a world in which we didn't get Sable over the line almost, like we're still making it. I think we were quite brutal with our the things that we just cut from the game, but that was also in part due to the structure of the game. We knew that the way that we had structured the game content-wise suited cutting stuff from the game, because there was no interdependent content other than the beginning and the end of the game. So once we'd done the beginning, everything else is a side quest, right? It's just you hit a certain percentage. And so that meant that we could cut half of the content a year before production ended, just to be like, okay, we just need to finish this game. How are we going to finish this game? And that was a really useful thing. But I've heard of other teams where they have a more, a traditionally structured narrative, say, and they build the first half of their game, or they block out the whole thing, and then they have this very inflexible structure. And cutting stuff would mean fundamentally affecting other elements of the game, and so they're stuck in a position where they just have to make it. and it's just a slog, and it's just like 4 years. It's just 3 or 4 years, and it's just like you just have to make this video game, and they do it, and the game comes out, and it does well, but it's a very long time to make a video game. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So can you outline like the creative journey you took alongside your
Daniel, yeah.
your co-creator of Sable, Dan, who Harry just destroyed on Melee that one time.
I did.
What?
I read him. There's this thing basically that lets you play Melee online, and I ran into.
Oh, that's so funny.
Shadowworks Dan.
And you destroyed him.
Yeah, I felt kind of bad about it, and then later I realized he was playing it on his Steam Deck, and I'm like, okay, that's a bit more understandable.
Sure. Yeah. No. We used to play not Melee, but what's the latest one?
Ultimate.
Ultimate. Yeah, we were playing Ultimate like every lunch. We got pretty good, but he started playing Melee, but that's a fairly recent thing. Going back to it, but
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, can you like outline your creative journey you took to start the concept and the creative journey that led to Sable, essentially?
Yeah. So I studied architecture, and Daniel studied comparative literature at uni, and we started Shedworks immediately after. Like literally, I think it was the week after I graduated. We were in the shed, and
you were in the exact position I am now.
Yeah.
It's wild to think about.
We went to the pub and we had a chat, and we were like, okay, we're not gonna get jobs. We're not even gonna get internships. So what if we just like make our own internship and start a company and make some games? He had done some basic programming, and I'd done some 3D work and 2D art and design work. And that's how we started. So for the first 3 years, we made some mobile games. We released 2, 3, I can't remember. And we'd even signed with some terrible deals with publishers. So we made a little bit of money, not very much. And we were doing contract work as well. So, and at the same time, we were kind of making our own stuff. And Sable. So I occasionally would just work on my own projects on the side, stuff that I didn't think would be financially viable, I guess. So I had several projects like that. And Sable, I was watching Force Awakens, whenever that came out, and I remember just watching the beginning of that where Rey is on Jakku and thinking like, oh yeah, what if she just never left? Like, that would be a cool video game. And I thought I'd start that off as a like little, I don't know, some sort of loot type isometric small project, really small project, on my own. And then I was talking about it with Daniel one day before we were going to the pub, and we started just messing around with some like Unity asset store. We downloaded like a free sand dune asset, like a 2K by 2K sand dune asset, and a €5 hover car asset, and then put a giant cube, like a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer cube on the other side of the map. And then I'd taken some rendering stuff, some line work rendering stuff I've been doing in a different project, where I was trying to like replicate an architectural drawing style. So it was actually black and white initially, and then we added some color to it, and I did some skybox stuff to it, and that's when we started looking a little bit at the clear line stuff with the Mobius and Tintin and stuff, and we spent about 2-3 hours putting this thing together. And all you could do was just drive around these dunes and drive to the giant cube 2 kilometers away. And we took that to the pub, our local pub meetup, put it on the table, went and had a pint, and we could just see people were like kind of into it. We're like, okay, that's kind of interesting. Nobody's really given a shit about anything we've made up until now. And we've made better games than that, better video games. So it's kind of interesting. But then we just thought, we'll never make money doing that. It would just be a small hobby project. So we shelved it, and we tried pitching it for funding a few times, and we got rejected. And I worked up some concept and did some art and thought about the game a lot and thought, okay, if we ever get some money, this will be like, we'll do 6 months and we'll just throw this thing out, and it'll just be like a really small project. And then a year later, we had like 2 weeks kind of in between projects, and Daniel started playing with some, rendering stuff, shaders. He started writing some shaders, and I did some characters, some a character model, new character design, and I think Daniel just threw a GIF up on Twitter, and it did way better than anything we'd ever done before. And we're like, okay, that's interesting. And we kind of just we kind of faked a GIF of this character on the bike, and it just did insanely well. We had like articles written about it, and it was like, okay. And then just from there, it kind of took off, and we were just making it. And this was the idea. We had this idea for. It was kind of an open world, very loose game. The climbing aspect, we thought there would be climbing from the beginning, but we thought it might be more like, you see some ivy or something and you climb up it. And then Breath of the Wild came out, and it was like, okay, cool, very interesting. And
Must have been so annoying.
it was when it first was announced. We were like, shit, like Nintendo are just gonna do. But actually, it was really useful in the end. It was really useful. It was a really useful framework for talking about the game, for explaining to people what the game was.
Really, Nintendo did a lot of the work for you, basically.
Yeah. I barely did anything, to be honest. It was, but they did answer a lot of questions for us. But to be fair, I think it was a balance, because we were doing a lot of stuff already with the structure of the game, and I think that was the biggest thing that we were going to do. The biggest stuff that we kind of were able to take from them, I think even stuff like how big is the character, like how close is the camera zoomed in, and like can you, like some of those questions, really like minute technical questions that are just like we wouldn't have had the resources to keep playtesting. We had this.
You just look at it, you see it works, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Generally speaking, that was a useful just reference point for us, alongside a number of other stuff like Horizon, stuff like Final Fantasy 15, actually, weirdly. And there was a game. I remember actually one of the most important references for me was a game called Submerged, and I think this was maybe I can't remember when it came out, pre-Breath of the Wild or after, but that was the game I played, and I felt convinced we can make a non-violent exploration game.
Ooh.
I think, yeah,
that's interesting. So that's when sort of the decision came to like not include violence at all.
No, I wouldn't go that far. We had decided not to do the violence, but I remember feeling very like uncertain, a bit like, is that just going to be boring? Like, is it just not going to work? Do we need some sort of other, survival layer or something? And I played that game, and I remember thinking, like, well, Daniel and I sat down and played it together. I remember thinking at the time, like, it gave me the confidence to feel like, oh no, there's something here that's really interesting, and it's compelling, in a way that doesn't use violence, and it has a different structure to what we were going for, but yeah, it was a really interesting game to play at the time.
That's very interesting to me, because it was such a refreshing part about Sable, in my opinion. Because you're almost kind of expecting it in an open world game like this, and like it took me a few hours to realize what I was playing. So wait a minute, this game doesn't have any combat. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, we knew we like games with combat in them. Like you played Daniel in Melee, and also, you know, like all the Souls likes and Zeldas and Metroids. You know, we like those games. We love them. I wouldn't even be against making a game with combat in it. We just didn't think we could do it well. We thought that Dark Souls already exists. Like what are we going to bring to the table there? Probably, you know, does it help us to tell the story we want to tell? And can we make a game that's interesting enough, has enough of a loop to it that we could go without combat? And yeah, it was, I think it was quite successful, but it does put a lot of burden on the exploration, puts a lot of burden on the other bits being really top tier, the atmosphere of the game, the way it feels, but also like you don't get this. I don't know, I kind of get a bit jealous of developers who can like have a room and then put an enemy in it, and like that's like 5 minutes of content. It's just like, wow, yeah, I'm jealous of that. Yeah, like, you know, that would have been a bit of a luxury at some point, but it comes with its own problems, and we would have had to be, you know, one of the reasons that we went without faces was because I didn't think I could animate and model loads of faces, so we were just like, let's do masks, and then we built the kind of lore and the world around that. We were like, okay, well, why is that the case? So I think a lot of the themes of the development of Sable come from working through limitation, and I think a lot about limitation, not just limitation and strength, right? Like up to Sable, we hadn't made a game that had any architecture in it, and we hadn't made a narrative game. So we hadn't made a game that related to either of our degrees in any way whatsoever for the first 3 years. And I remember just turning around to Daniel one time and saying, what are we doing? Like, why have we done this? But we learned a lot. We learned a lot doing those other things, actually. And I think it gave us kind of a broad appreciation and skill set to the point where, like, if we had gone straight into working on Sable from day one, it wouldn't have been the project it became. So
yeah, I guess it's kind of easy to sort of make that narrative from the outside, isn't it? Where like it's, oh yeah, these sort of new, fresh-faced young developers on the scene, and they sort of nail it the first time with Sable. But I guess there's like a lot of stuff that's happened before that sort of informed your work on Sable.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things for me, even just finishing a game, like we had released a game even after we'd started Sable called Swing King and the Temple of Bling, and it was like a mobile puzzler. And one of the things that I learned from that game was just that like releasing a video game nowadays is a milestone. It's not an endpoint. Like, you have to keep going. Just like emotionally, that's not easy. Like that, there is no. And I remember even my girlfriend was like, "I thought you were finished with Sable. Like I thought we could celebrate and stuff." I was like, "No, like we got to keep going. We got." Yeah, well, yeah, that was a year after launch.
DLC.
Yeah, stop people calling it a dead game because we haven't updated it in 3 weeks.
Oh my god, people do that even for like non-multiplayer games.
Oh yeah. It's intense. Like, yeah, I kind of wish I could release a dead
we live
game.
In live service hell.
It's somewhat true. I have a deep admiration for people who can keep plugging away on a project. I mean, yeah, it's tough. I think one of the things on Sable specifically was that because we started it as quite a small project, I always compare it to like you're starting a race, right? And you think it's 100 meters, but then you decide to like delay, and you're like, oh no, it's 150 meters. When you're about, I don't know, 20 meters in, so you're like, okay, I'll change my pace a little bit. And then you get to like 120 meters, and then you're like, actually, no, it's going to be 200 meters. And you're like, okay. But you've been running as if it was 150 or 100 meters up to that point. And then it ends up being,
a marathon.
Exactly. you get past the fucking finish line and you got to keep going. They're like, no, that wasn't the finish line. Yeah, so that I think that's tough. Like you have to be prepared for that emotionally, and those big moments. Even those big moments, like when we did the PC gaming show at E3, I remember like the adrenaline was just incredible. Like just going up on stage and just announcing our game, and like Twitter going mad, and like I was so glad I hadn't eaten that day, because I would have been sick. I would have really been sick. But then after, I just crashed so hard, just emotionally, just like all the endorphins just seeped out of my body. I just went to bed at like, I don't know, 7 p.m. that day. I was just like, I'm depressed. Like, I just need to go to bed. And I remember just thinking like, I think this is just chemicals. Like, I think it's just chemicals. I just have to remember that, because it's not a cool place to be. It was not that fun. And yeah, again, that's another thing that like, as you get experience, you learn like, okay, what does this mean, and how do I deal with like showing something very publicly and it like not making the impact that I wanted it to make, or it, whatever.
So can I ask you, like, I'm really curious, as someone who like is like both a video essayist and a game developer, you're just gonna have to take my word on that for now. I don't have much to show yet, but what's it like seeing video essays on your game?
Yes, it's cool. It's cool. I really enjoy engaging in that side of like academic thought. Like I recently was at a archaeology and games conference in Leiden with a bunch of like PhDs in archaeology, and I loved that. That was great. And then I went to an animation festival and talked about Sable to animators and people with the focus on that. And I love engaging with that side of it. I think it's really cool when someone hits on a part of the game that you had talked about and that was like really intended, and then you're like, yeah, like that came across. Like I'm so hyped that came across, because I think when you hear criticism about the game, most developers, when it's a like technical critique of the game, it's sort of like, I know, like we know, like we're not blind. Like we know what's wrong with our games when and it's hard because you just that's the hardest part of looking at those. When it's a more creative critique, I think it's more interesting, because I think we when we finished Sable, we really felt like we stood by it creatively. So when someone was kind of certain criticisms of it, you're just like, well, it's not for you, and that's okay. Like I'm cool with that. Like that's not. It's rare that you see a critique that I just feel like, fuck you. Like I hate that. I disagree. Like there are very few things I've read where I felt that way.
You're wrong.
Yeah. I love it. I think it's great to see people thinking about your game in that way.
Because this is literally something that I have dreams about. Like I release a game and people like make video essays about how much it meant to them and how much its themes resonated with them, or how they found the exploration amazing, or whatever stuff like that. And I would just die. I would just I like that'd be just, for me, that'd be just mission accomplished. That
sure.
I can imagine it.
He's made it.
I think
That's how you know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's interesting that. Oh yeah, or on Sable.
I mean, not just one, but two. I was like, this game's really good. I need to do another one.
I might have seen them. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I have to take it back.
Second one.
Okay. Okay. I'll take a look. But yeah, I think it's interesting though, because for me, I didn't really, when I was growing up, YouTube wasn't really a thing, especially for YouTube game criticism.
Sphere.
And I think even it's not really something I like I'm like really plugged into. So it's cool to see, but it's not something that I felt really like was in my head as a like goal. I wasn't like, oh yeah, imagine if a game of mine had that sort of thing. Whereas like when I did the cover for Edge magazine, that was like, oh shit, like that was the sort of thing I would run out and buy when I was a kid, you know. And yeah, that was exciting. And when we got a Famitsu review, that was like, yeah, cool. So I think that's just, I don't know, just my experience of game fandom when I was younger, I guess, was kind of different in that sense. But I do really like that people engage with it in an academic sense, and I really enjoy if a student talks to us and it's like, yeah, I wrote about your game in my thesis or whatever. Like that's exciting to me as well. That's really cool.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. But I've not read. No one sent me their thesis. They've just told me that it's. So I don't know if it's good or bad. But yeah.
Yeah. Or if like a game design professor brings it up in a lecture or stuff like that. It's just.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because like I think someone showed me we were featured. Like there's a chapter in a book. I can't remember what book, but I was just looking at what the book was based on was like totally like not good. It was a bad source. It was like I really wish you'd just spoken to me about this.
Oh no.
Yeah, so that was a shame. But yeah, when something like that happens, you're like, I've just got to like not look, like otherwise I'm going to take psychic damage. Yeah, so that's
really funny.
Yeah, so you have to be a bit
the wrong book.
Yeah, it wasn't even like bad criticism. It was just like, you've. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to get into. But no, I'm very grateful for like the position that we've found ourselves in with Sable, and yeah, the only downside about it all is that just throughout development, thinking like I would really love to play this game, but I can't. Like it's ruined for me. I can't ever. Yeah.
You're missing out.
You mean Sable,
honestly.
or like games that come out? Like
No, Sable.
Yeah, you're missing out.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a good game.
Yeah.
Oh man, Sable's great. I've been
appreciate
playing it all day today.
Yeah. No, I mean, no, I could never experience it really.
Never did.
Maybe in like 10 years' time, I'll forget enough about it that like when I pick it up, it's feels fresh somehow. But yeah, at the moment, it's so like, how can you play an exploration game that you've put everything that yeah exactly. Yeah, which is a shame.
But still, it's a good problem to have, I think.
Oh yeah. And I mean, if I'm not making it, then who is? So yeah.
Exactly. So about the themes of Sable, like the narrative and sort of the thematic elements that I think resonated with a lot of people. It's this sort of growing up, finding yourself story.
Yeah.
Correct. So, can you like tell us about how that came to be, and how like you worked with having a female main character and finding herself, and how you worked around that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we kind of wanted to have a narrative that tied in with like the gameplay experience, the gameplay structure of the game, the exploration, and it felt like a good fit with that. And we looked at like we thought about just not pilgrimage, but just like coming of age ceremonies in different cultures. So stuff like walkabout, or just going to university. Rumspringer, different, and we thought about those sort of events in a young person's life, and this idea of exploring the world and how those two things kind of meshed really nicely, but also kind of what that means in this world specifically, and how so having had everyone go on this same journey, to discover themselves, was something that gave us a really cool framework or pretense for giving quests to the player, for example, and we really tried to lean into that and acknowledge it. And I think, the fact that, we tried to create quite a warm, welcoming world in a lot of senses. Not like wholesome isn't the right word for it. I kind of reject that as a term for Sable, because I think we do try to touch on more difficult things in places, not as much as maybe I would like, but we tried to make a world that was free of the kind of patriarchal systems that we experience in our world. We just thought that was an interesting thing to explore as an idea, but also encouraged the player to have that sense of exploration, to want to discover what was out there and what was in the world, like feeling that sort of warmth from the world, feeling that sort of safety. We hope that would also encourage exploration in the player. But I think it's a tricky balance, because you also have to have some sort of difficulty, some sort of tension in the game, and we always banked on the narrative having that. So Sable not knowing who she was, and the player helping her to figure that out, or like figuring that out alongside her, and also questioning what that means generally. Like, a lot of the masks, for example, are like profession oriented, but how we define ourselves in relation to work is quite a interesting, difficult thing in society. Like, I'm so defined by my job, but not everyone is, and not everyone should be. That's why we wanted some of the masks to not be related to professional things as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but it was a reason. It was trying to think. So like, it was really interesting, but it was quite tricky to then create moments of tension, moments of difficulty, stuff like the worm was like a fun thing to make, but it was tricky because we didn't have the mechanisms to like damage the player in any way. But so like building that through this very like fine-tuned atmosphere, like when you find the whale, just the pure scale of it needed to feel like daunting. When you find the worm and you work your way inside, that needed to feel like absolutely just insanely gross and weird and just messed up. And so those were places that we tried to introduce elements of discomfort or difficulty, I guess, rather than in specific like narrative beats or whatever. And we do kind of have, for example, in Ecria, some difficulty, some interesting like politics, I think, which I don't know how much of that came through. We really wanted to have the tension between the Sarai, the bit outside of the town, and the people inside the town, be a like defining element of that community. But it's hard to know. Like the Atomic Priesthood, for example, were a much stronger presence in the kind of plans for the game. We were going to have like a location for them. They were going to be a more of an oppressive kind of presence just generally in the society. And the ideas behind that stuff were related to like ideas of environmentalism. How do we store like atomic waste or just pollution in general over long periods of time, and like kind of exploring the role of religion in that potentially. And there was a lot of stuff that I'm not sure if it came through or not. It's sort of like
that's very interesting to me, because I think a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is like kind of heavily implied. I think it's definitely something that the player can pick up on, regardless of whether how much of it was cut. That's kind of interesting to think about how that works in a way, isn't it? Where it's like a logistical decision having an impact on how the game feels, almost.
Definitely. I think it's such a tricky balance knowing what should stay and what should go. And I think at some point there's also an issue of focus, right? Like if you have, some of those things are like, you might think they're important as a creator, or there might be themes you want to get in, but the kind of pure like through line of the game is about self-discovery and like coming of age. And so do you lose a bit of that if you get distracted by these other kind of explorations? So I think having those things imbued in like the world building is a way of getting that in. But it's hard to know how much of that comes through or not.
I think it's interesting that you talk about sort of tension as well, because or tension in the game, tension in the story. Because for me, it's like, let's say I don't know, I'm playing Skyrim or whatever, and I come across a quest where I have to play hide and seek with a group of kids.
Sure.
Hypothetically, let's say.
Sure.
In Skyrim, I'm the Dragonborn, right? I've got to save the world. I'm not going to play hide and seek with a group of kids. Whereas in Sable, it's sort of a completely different context. Of course, I'm going to play hide and seek with the group of kids. Of course, it's fun. It's like, I think.
Yes.
Do you think like the I guess the context with which the game takes place has effect on that?
Definitely. I think because ultimately you're games sit in a kind of weird place where you're like role playing a character, like you're in control, but also in this instance we tried to make Sable a character too. And she has her own thoughts and personality, but also she's not necessarily your age or your gender or whatever, and she's definitely not from where you're from because it's fictional. So there's always an element of like putting yourself in the character. And so like you say, if you are someone on a world saving quest and you're going to play hide and seek with some kids, it will feel disconnected from that experience. But and maybe that's sometimes that tension relief is a good thing. Sometimes it helps to juxtapose against these grander themes and ideas. And that's sort of like what we try to do with the architecture, for example. We try to have this grand kind of monumental like big implications architecture, these big ships and stuff like that, but also just like people living in them and like doing ordinary things, and that contrast was a like really important theme of the game in a way, because one of the big things that we really wanted to get in the game was this idea of like exploring different ways of living, that like progress isn't necessarily like a linear thing in our minds. Like when people described it as like post-apocalyptic, I just disagreed with that. For me it was well, I guess the term would be post-apocalyptic, like that's sort of the genre that we've ended up with. But for me there was never actually really an apocalypse in this world whatsoever. It was just like people adapted to living on the planet, and it was just a different way of living, and it's just about a difference in culture and society rather than better, worse, whatever. It was just different, and we really wanted to like open people to that, but also show people the humanity in that, not try to create such a grand difference in like not to make it so different to make it unrelatable, right? So yeah, I think the way you frame these things is really important. I think that's also true for like every aspect of the game. Spent a lot of time thinking about like the marketing of the game, and how people arrive to the game. So for example, I basically got in a lot of arguments with the trailer guys, Raw Fury, because I was like, do not show Ecria, do not show the town, do not show the worm. I will murder you if you show any of that shit. Like I want people, like
in any circumstances, do not show the worm.
It was, yeah, but it was important to me because I wanted people to arrive to Ecria, because I think that was something that like Horizon Zero Dawn actually did incredibly well. When I first arrived at Meridian, is that what it's called? The big city. I was like, what the fuck? Where did this? I was not expecting this in this video game. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on this podcast. Anyway,
Sure you can. Fuck.
okay,
Fuck.
cool. I don't know. But I was like, wow, that's special. That's cool. Like the element of surprise was important because if I'd seen that ahead of time, I think part of what I really wanted from Sable was for people to be able to talk about the game to each other and be like, oh, have you seen this yet? Have you seen that? What did you do here? Have that idea of like playground whispers sort of imbued in it. And I think a lot of that also comes from how people arrive to the game. So if someone arrives and they're feeling really like impatient and they're really like they want to play something fast and heavy and like go, they can have a bad time. They're not arriving in the right headspace to play a game like Sable. Whereas if they arrive with this very like calm, like kind of ready to take their time and for the pace to be really slow but also bringing a sense of curiosity to the world and just openness, I think they're going to have a better time. They're going to enjoy themselves. And so setting the pace, I think, begins when you're showing those gifts, when you're like telling people about the game, because that's how they discovered it in the first place. And then it goes through the trailer, it comes through the music, but also then, the opening of the game and how you make people sit down and you say, okay, like this is the pace that you need to be arriving at these things with. And that's also going to maybe affect how you receive the narrative as well, I think. Yeah.
So I was playing it literally today, right? And that's because I'm bad at playing
Fake
games
Sable fan.
Yeah. It came out during my busiest time in uni, and so it was in my backlog like forever. So anyway, finally played it today. And something that struck me is Sable's narration, because she's like really open about her emotions and like how things make her feel. And I found that really interesting because, as like in games, like you're like supposed to make the player relate to the main character and like map themselves to them in some level. But here you have like Sable describing her emotions like very specifically. So you can have the player be like, I don't feel any of those things. Like I don't relate to this. I don't feel any of these things. But at the same time, she's talking about like being anxious and scared and excited at the same time to go on this journey to like discover herself, to find out who she is. And I think that anyone who like went through that or is in the process of going through this, because like, for example, I just graduated uni and I am in that stage of my life where it's like very transitional, and I know that big changes are coming in the future, and they'll know those feelings. They'll know those feelings. They'll know what she's talking about. They'll know what she means, and it really resonated with me a lot. And it's one of the reasons that I think these themes like really resonated with people.
No, I think it was like a big decision that we made early on in development was to have the narration be like written in as prose, rather than just purely dialogue. And part of that was because sorry, did I talk?
It's fine. No, it's fine.
I talk over?
I think Darkfry's gone, but I'm sure we can get him back at some point. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a decision we made really early on with the narration to be done as prose, and part of that decision was made because we were a bit nervous about not having faces showing, so we wanted a way to like humanize the character, but also we were worried about players not we wanted a way to contextualize certain things in the world, in this culture, in this community, without having to like use lots of exposition in the dialogue. So there's a kind of useful, interesting mechanism there. And we were using a dialogue system called Ink, which is made by Ink.
Yes, big fan of Ink.
Yeah, it's great. And you know, one of the big like reference points for us with that was 80 Days, and that was and also the sorcery stuff that they'd done previously, and even Heaven's Vault. But with the way those games were written, had that prose aspect to them, so that was, you know, something that we looked at and we thought, okay, maybe that works here as well. But I haven't actually seen much of that done in a third person like video game before, like a game like a 3D third person video game.
It feels quite unique to me.
It was unique.
Like the dialogue definitely has like a kind of almost like a warmth to it that I've not really seen in.
That's what I was about to say before my internet kicked me out. Sorry about that.
No.
The writing made me smile a lot.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen a lot, and it was very unique, and it was like, it felt very warm, very nice, and it was describing emotions that like I could definitely like relate to, and even though like I was just meeting these characters, I was just like being introduced to this world, I know what she's talking about. I know what she means.
Yeah.
Like, same mood.
Well, that's big credit to Kim and David at Sweet Baby, who wrote the majority of the dialogue. Well, like 99% of the writing in Sable, and they did a really good job. Really amazing to work with, and I think part of that was just also that we really wanted to get a bit of humor into the game. We did want it to feel quite warm, but also even in the quest design, like what you're doing, we kind of wanted some of those things to be a bit kind of playful and silly maybe, but in a way that I think could be, I don't know, I kind of think of parts of it as quite British in that sense, like I think some of the humor that we have, gets put in, and like the dryness of it maybe, I hope some of that is translated, because I think that's sort of like where we are humor-wise. So.
Sable.
Yeah.
Not that kind of British humor, Doug Fry.
You've actually been saying it wrong this whole time.
I like the quest where you have to collect beetle poo. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Where like she asks you, and Sable's just like, "You want me to get poo for you?" He's like, "Yeah."
Yeah. No. Yeah. Exactly. We did try and get it in a bit. So that. But you do that also from the quest design aspect, and you're trying to tie like what the player is doing to the writing and to the design of the game, and the actions, and sometimes I think if what you're asking is a bit kind of like essentially what in that quest you're asking the player to jump on a beetle, which is like a very like Mario thing, right? So if you kind of tying it into some other ecology, I don't know, it feels less ridiculous if you kind of point at it and say like this is ridiculous, but it's sometimes things we do in real life are ridiculous, and I think acknowledging that sometimes is quite fun as well, or not acknowledging it but just do it, forcing the player to do it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your insight, Gregorios. We have come to the end of this episode. I have hit all the main things.
Yeah, great.
Wanted to speak to you about.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been
no problem.
It's been good fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Gregorios.
Thank you so much for your time and
it's been really good.
your brain juices. They were delicious. Um, suck that with a straw. It's very good. Any last messages you want to, any last words you want to say to the wonderful people listening, to perhaps any aspiring indie developers that may or may not be listening to this podcast?
Well, I've got a lot more kind of things that I say and show in the book that's coming, so maybe pick that up. And
Hell yeah.
yeah, otherwise, also I did a GDC talk that is free on the GDC website. I don't think they put it up on YouTube, but you can also check that out if you want to see some of the thoughts behind like limitation and art and design in Sable. And yeah, otherwise, yeah, thanks for watching and listening. I hope it was fun.
Hell yeah. So, you heard the man. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the podcast and YouTube things. We'll see you next time, folks. See you later.